Well, the Chequers deal may well have united the cabinet, but some Eurosceptic Tory MPs have already raised a number of concerns. So much so that it's reported some may be considering trying to trigger a leadership contest. Sir Bill Cash has campaigned long and hard for Brexit, and he joins me now. Very good to see you. Yes. What do you make of it? I'm presuming not much.
Well, first of all, we got the Withdrawal Act through. Repealing the 1972 Act is the crown of all. That is the most important thing. If you repeal the 72 Act, you get out of the rules and obligations. You also get out of the Court of Justice. The problem is that this statement, these 3 pages, followed by the White Paper, which of course we haven't seen yet,
indeed,
and all the kerfuffle and shenanigans that we witnessed over the last 24 hours, actually raises an enormous number of very, very serious questions.
Specifically?
Well, specifically, the question is, to what extent are we going to be bound by EU rules? I mean, that is to summarise this. I mean, if you leave, you leave. And that is what the question asked for, and that is what the answer they got. So the question is, are we actually going to leave, or are we going to be bound in to some form of legal framework, as I said to the Prime Minister on Monday this last week, or which would amount to some kind of legal re-entry of some description? Now, until we see the White Paper, we can't. I'm not ducking the question at all. What I am saying, on the basis of what I've seen so far and the discussions that have emerged in the commentaries, I think people have every reason to be concerned.
Yeah, indeed. In the terms that it's described, I mean, a common rule book. I mean, it sounds like you've got a copy of, the rules of association football in your back.
Well, it's the EU common rule book as well, by all accounts. And the question is, how and to what extent would we actually be able to make our own decisions on our own terms? One of the biggest mistakes that was made, in my opinion, from the beginning, was accepting the EU guidelines as being the basis on which we would negotiate. So we've effectively put ourselves in a position where we are more supplicating than actually saying we're leaving. And we have absolutely equal rights, as my European Scrutiny Committee report said a short time ago. We have an absolutely equal right with the other member states because we're leaving under Article 50.
I mean, we've heard from Michael Gove elsewhere this morning and indeed in the statement that we would retain the ability to say no. If there was a rule change that we didn't like, we could say no. But presumably there would be consequences that flowed from that.
Well, it's not only that there would be consequences that flow from it, because the Prime Minister has made that clear, and she made it clear in a previous speech as well, as a matter of fact. But the real point is this, that when you're dealing with the manner in which the laws are made in the Council of Ministers, if we're tied into those arrangements, but we're not actually at the table and we don't have a judge in the European Court, then what will happen is that the decisions that were taken by the 27 in creating the new rules, and then the question will arise, to what extent are we actually going to be bound by them? I think there's a complete lack of clarity there, and that's one of the things that this White Paper has really got to sort out. And by the way, a White Paper is what it says. It's a beginning of a statement of policy. There's going to be a huge amount of argument and a great deal of determination to get these things clear.
But, I mean, there's no way around this, though. According to the statement from Chequers a couple of days ago, I mean, we would be a rule taker and not a rule maker.
I believe that is the case.
So what follows from that? I mean, that doesn't strike me as the Brexit that you ever wanted to see.
Well, what I'm saying is that we have a White Paper and there's going to be an enormous amount of argument and discussion about what these words mean. So Lewis Carroll said, words mean what you choose them to mean. The question is, who is to be master, that is all. And quite frankly, the master cannot be the EU.
In terms of freedom of movement, do you see this as coming to an end from what you've heard thus far? I mean, in the statement, point H, end free movement, giving the UK back control over how many people enter the country. Point I, include a mobility framework so that UK and EU citizens can continue to travel and work in other countries.
This is very vague. I mean, nobody actually knows what a mobility framework is.
It's not very vague. It says that we're going to take back control of our borders and at the same time allow EU citizens to come live, work here, as they already do.
When I say vague, it's contradictory. I think that's another way of putting it. But the bottom line is that she said yesterday, unequivocally, that freedom of movement would end. And by the way, you have to. As I said there last week in Parliament, if you repeal the 72 Act, you actually achieve 3 things. First of all, you get out of the customs union, you regain your sovereignty, and at the same time, you also get out of the single market and you reject the European Court of Justice. The question is, how and to what extent will this White Paper actually square that particular circle? Because the reality is that it's clear and it's the law of the land.
Doesn't the agreement on goods look to you awfully like, a smaller, trimmed-down single market customs union?
Well, it looks like very much like the new customs partnership, which we went through a few weeks ago, and that was rejected by a meeting of the sub-cabinet of the cabinet. And so that's another area which raises an enormous number of questions, because the most important thing is that we have to be able to trade independently throughout the world to be able to gain the maximum benefits. And 59% of all the existing arrangements within the EU in terms of our trading relations has now dropped to 59 to 42%, but 90%, and this is a key point, of all future growth in the world will be outside the EU. That is the prize, and that's what we have to do. So we have to have an independent trade policy, and anything that gets in that way is going to be a very, very serious disadvantage and may be very, very bad for the UK.
Is Theresa May's position today any more or less secure as a result of what's emerged from Chequers?
Well,
I mean, have you written a letter?
I have not, no.
Would you
what I'm
write a
saying,
letter?
I'm certainly not saying anything of the kind. What I am saying is that this is a white paper. It was an enormous triumph, a victory against all the master rays of the House of Lords and the Remainers, the Ramonas, the Reversers, all the rest of it, Grievites, the lot. They all did everything to stop that going through in the way in which we wanted it to go through. But it did go through, we got the Act, and the bottom line is that that gives us the sovereignty of the United Kingdom Parliament back. But now we're into the business of how we deal with this part of the process, which is the white paper. And the other thing is, are the EU even remotely going to accept all this?
Well, that's
a really big question.
Indeed. My point is this, though, for all the triumphalism about the fact that actually, you know, a Prime Minister got her cabinet to agree to something emerging from Chequers, it strikes me that given the fact on the Sunday papers, once again, we're hearing talk of people writing letters to the chairman of the 1922. It doesn't look like she's any safer.
Well, it certainly raises a lot of question marks on that account as well. And by the way, if people were to decide to put in those letters, you only need 48. And as a matter of fact, nobody can stop them. And once the decision has been taken by those people, the chairman of the 1922 committee has to implement the process. But the key question is that there are a lot of questions in here. There is a lot of unhappiness. There is a great deal of concern that we're saying that we leave. You could put it this way, right? It's not just to be or not to be, it's to leave or not to leave. The question is, how do you leave, and is this going to be a proper Brexit? And there will be a massive discussion about all this. It's a white paper, and that provides us with the means to do it, and we're going to do a thorough analysis of it, and we'll come up with our own analysis, and we'll put it to the Cabinet and to the British people.
I'll bet you will. Bill Cash, lovely to see you.
Anyway, and you too. Thank you.